To everybody joining, hello. We are glad you're here today. In case you were expecting the big boss, John Kohler, he is sitting this one out today. Don't be fooled by my name there. I'm using his account. So I'm Danielle Kohler. I'm the design director, and we are doing the marketing biographies webinar today. And we've got three authors today, although there are two books. Two of them are co-authors. We'll talk about that. If you have a question, as always, there is a Q&A feature at the bottom. It has a little question mark. You can write your questions in there and we'll be looking at them throughout, and wherever we see fit to answer them, we'll do that. Otherwise, let's get started. I'm going to share my little screen here. All right, so our first panelist today, where is the book cover? Oh, okay, the images are missing. I'm so sorry. I'll stay on the first screen so you can see the book images there. But we've got Carey Henry Keefe. She is the author of A Tide of Dreams, the untold backstory of Coach Paul Bear Bryant. Is that how you pronounce it? Bryant?
Bryant.
Okay. And coaches Carney Lassley and Frank Mosley. She's the
Mostly.
granddaughter. I said it wrong, mostly.
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay. She's the granddaughter of one of the book's subjects, Coach Carney Lassley, and she attended the University of Richmond, where she got a BS in business management, and she now writes full time, drawn to research and the telling of undiscovered and compelling tales of historical events and the people behind them. So she'll talk about that and what inspired her to write this. Obviously, she's got the family connection, as does Maria C. Palmer, who is the author of On the Rocks, the Prima Donna Story. She is also a regular co-moderator for the Food is Religion Club on Clubhouse and was a former host on LA Talk Radio. She's the daughter of award-winning restaurateur Joseph Constanza Jr. And her co-author is Ruthie Robbins. She is an award-winning educator who worked for the Montour School District in Pittsburgh and for Johns Hopkins University Talent Development Secondary. And she now teaches English language arts and music in Buffalo, New York. So thank you all for agreeing to be on this webinar today. This is our first one. Well, no, it's not our first one with biographies, but the first one we did was two military biographies. So this is, and they were memoirs, they were personal. So this is, different than that. So what I like to do to get started is always start with your elevator pitch. You got a minute, you got to tell somebody what your book is about. And I think this, in particular, Carey, I think your book came out in 2022. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. And Maria and Ruthie, yours came out last year, or was it the beginning of this year? Yeah. So,
Yeah, 2020.
this is something that people usually practice around launch, and then you gotta still do it years later. So, Carey, why don't we start with you? What's your elevator pitch for A Tide of Dreams?
Well, it is the story of my grandfather, godfather, and Coach Paul Bear Bryant, a legendary football coach. And it's more a story about their friendship and their journey to, as a collaborative partnership. And it touches on the life of a football family, the history of college football, and their experiences in World War II. It has a lot of football anecdotes, and everyone that's read it says that it's more a story about friendship and loyalty and aspirations and dreams. And you follow that along with the narrative. And hopefully I've done a good enough job of weaving the three men's lives together, which they were all very much part of each other's lives for their whole life. So, yeah. Is that a minute?
I think that was under a minute. That was very concise.
Yeah. It was pretty fast. Yeah.
All right, and Maria and Ruthie, you guys can ping pong. What's your
Um,
elevator?
Go ahead, Maria. You want me to do it? Okay.
Yeah.
So On the Rocks is the story of my father, Joseph Costanzo Jr., who took a failing business in a little small suburb of Pittsburgh called McKees Rocks, Pennsylvania. And he took it to one of America's top Italian restaurants. And at the height, we had celebrities and sports stars and broadcasters. And it all changed with a knock on my door, unfortunately, whenever I was 20 years old. And it was the federal government looking for him. He was the subject of a federal grand jury investigation, which automatically made the suit a criminal, not a civil suit. And it follows his fall, which unfortunately ends with a stint in federal prison. But the book is very much action packed. It's short chapters, lots happen, but the undertones are very much love of the family, what it means to be human, the duality of humanity, and how we have really wonderful things about us and things that we'd rather not tell others or show others. So it's been a really fun project, and it's was really a blessing because I actually worked with Ruthie. People should know our relationship to get. Oh, there's Sean Cooler. Hello. Ruthie was actually my high school English teacher, so that is the connection. And she grew up in McKees Rocks, and we have if there are 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. We maybe have two, if not 1.5, over the course of our lives. So that's our book.
A quick aside, my father grew up in McKees Rocks.
Oh my.
Wow.
That is
That is
crazy.
crazy.
Yes, that
Hey,
is
I'm going to jump off. I just wanted to say hi to 4 of the smartest women I know. You guys are awesome. So glad you're doing this. Hello to everybody else, and I'm out. Peace out.
Hopefully it doesn't. There we go. Okay. Um, that is a crazy connection. There you go. He's right.
okay. So I'm going to read that book.
Yeah. And we're going to talk about how to leverage community and your local community. So that was a
Yes.
really great connection right there.
That was a
I
crazy
have to interrupt.
connection.
Speaking of football and the connection, most people know about Damar Hamlin, the Buffalo Bill, who had the heart attack on the field last year. And he had his mother has a daycare, and his goal was $25,000 for toys. And they got $9 million. And that building sits exactly behind the prima donna in McKees Rocks. So on my little street where I grew up, these great big things are happening.
Wow.
That's
That's cool.
awesome. Cool connections. And Ruthie, I do want to ask you for your elevator pitch because you're not related to the subject. So your pitch would be different than Maria's. So if you have, a minute to tell somebody what the book is about, I'm imagining that would be different.
It's essentially the same. You practice your elevator pitch.
Hmm.
So it is the same, but I do say that I was Maria's teacher, one of the first customers, because I tried the restaurant that was on the street where I grew up. Then I later taught Maria, and my ex-husband was the coach and taught the other daughter. And then my son and Maria's sister went to dance together. So we have all these connections. I don't normally say them in the elevator pitch, but I thought Maria would take that. So that's just my little slant, not something I'd say in the elevator actually, but no time to refine it.
All right. Okay. Well, before we jump into marketing, which I know is why everybody's here, I do want to focus a little bit on the writing because I do think that when you're writing a biography, you have to think about, all of the research that obviously goes into it. Although these were family members, you still, how do you, number one, let's start with number one because these are personal stories to some extent. I think Maria, yours because it's your father, and Carey, yours is one generation more removed. How do you stay objective? You're wading through all of this, research, but you don't want it to be too personal. So how did you deal with that when writing the stories? You want it to, be open to everybody.
Well, I'll just jump in because one of the subjects matter is Bear Bryant, who is, if you're a college football fan, you know who that is, with Alabama, legendary football coach. And I was doing his backstory, which had never been told. And of course, and my grandfather and my godfather. I didn't want it to be a story that was sounded like a story that my grandmother had told my mother and my mother had told me. So it was very important to legitimize the narrative. And it took me 8 years of a lot of research. And so the feedback I've gotten is that I took a very even hand with all of them. I did not set out to gloss over, or actually, I also didn't set out to make it a tell-all, or to expose, something in a dramatic way. I just wanted it to be very honest and very real. And so I think when people when they do read something like that, you can tell that you're not glossing over or trying to put a better spin on things. So if you are referencing and using a lot of objective research, fortunately for my story, there was a lot of newspapers and articles and things already in the written space that I could then apply to all, throughout the time span that I wrote about. So that was very much in the forefront of my mind when I was writing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Maria, how about you?
Yeah, so I think the best way to answer your question is lots and lots of therapy. Because whenever, I have to be honest, whenever I started this project, it was really just truly a family history piece. And a lot of really wonderful things have happened with my family. And my dad is a very wonderful, charismatic person who changed a lot of people's lives. But we have some dark spots too. And I think the toughest thing, not so much for me, because as a female, I think we lean into being vulnerable, right? We're okay with showing some sides of us that we would, want to improve. As a male, that's very hard. As an Italian male, you want to take that, and I'm not a math person, but you want to multiply it by at least 100, maybe 1 million. It was very, very hard to get my dad to a place where we told the whole story. To be honest, whenever Ruthie came into it, I didn't really talk about the prison piece, maybe just kind of glossed over it, because once that happened in my life, that's what happened in the real world. Once he came out of prison, everybody, my entire family, just stopped talking about it like it didn't exist. So how was I to craft this in a piece of writing? I didn't feel comfortable. I didn't want to go up against him. And it really, took Ruthie's talking and coaching and being, and maybe she can kind of answer from the third person point of view, why we felt that was completely necessary. But, I think a lot of people probably felt similar to her in the community, that one day we were here serving pasta and the next day we weren't. And that was it. And there was an article about his retirement, which did not at all talk about the fact that there was something else going on. So once we were able to crack that, I think the story became a lot richer. And not only did he open up, he almost opened up too much to certain things. But, I think it might be interesting to hear how Ruthie's perspective on that, because she was working with our crazy family to try to tell this whole story in a way that made sense for the audience and for the reader. So I'll pass it to
What's your
Ruthie.
secret?
Okay, I think writers who are tuned in will enjoy hearing this journey, because we struggled. So at first, Maria had written in her voice, And I liked it. And of course, I liked it because I knew the story and it told some things I didn't know. And when you know the people and the setting, of course, you're going to enjoy the read. But I felt because she was a young child when the restaurant opened, I felt that her perspective was not the best. A lot of it was hearsay. She was too young. I wanted to hear more from Joe. So we talked about that. It just didn't seem fitting. So we started to write in the third person. That was my first advice. And we'd write in, I filled in details, but it sounded like an English teacher wrote it. There was something stiff about it. And I belonged to a writers group in Buffalo, and published author, crime fiction author, Lisa Redmond, said one day, "Why don't you write in Joe's voice?" And I kind of chuckled, but I called Maria on the way home and said, "They said we should try to write in your dad's voice." And we tried it, and it changed everything. It just kind of became fun. And then it also opened up, like, what is he not telling? Where are the gaps? It just made it so much easier. And at first he was resistant. Maria would talk to him and I would call him directly. And this was during the pandemic, so we had lots of time. And he'd kind of, brush off things. But I don't want to give away too much of the story, but he had some serious health problems. And as they got more serious, he became more open to sharing his vulnerabilities. So it evolved slowly, but it's very unusual for two women to write a biography in the man's voice. And that's what makes it seem like it's not a collection of facts. And that's what made it not boring. And he's a larger than life character. So we could either remember things he actually said or come very close to the way he would say it. And then we would fact check things. When he was ill, Maria would actually read him the book. And that really kept his momentum going. It gave him something to be excited about, and in a dark time. So that's before that, this is my 50th year teaching. So before that, first person, third person, that was just a test question. It didn't mean much to me until I started to write. But for writers out there, I'd say try in different voices, try first person, try the third person, try something creative, and you might get a different slant and start to feel differently about the project. It went from a struggle to fun for us. It really did.
Carey, that was actually one of my questions, was how do you take just a bunch of facts and make it interesting and entertaining? And Carey, how did you knit together all of these three lives and, over decades? How did you think, I need to make this entertaining, I need to give it a certain voice? Did you have
Right. Well, it took a very long time to find the narrative arc for that story. And then also to make it interesting. My mother she's 88. She's still alive and has had a great, vivid memory. But I had, yeah, I mean, how do you make it not boring and just a lot of facts? Not a lot of facts, but I think whenever you're writing the life story of someone, it's, I didn't have the benefit of interviewing the subject matters. So I was able to interview family members and people that they worked with to get to insert anecdotes that exemplified all of the things that I was reading about in newspapers and everything else. It's interesting too, and the way newspapers in the 20s and 30s and 40s are written is different. And I loved reading the sports pages. The sports stories came alive with a lot of great stories that I then was able to use. So part of it is that love of history. I mean, I don't think history is boring. Some people might, but I feel like in the end, I was able to craft something that was more of a you did the characters, the people came out and their lives. I talked about the families a lot too, the struggles, the football life. So for a lot of people, that also gave it a um, some interest. Talking about the time period, college at the University of Alabama, for instance, in the 20s, that I gleaned from reading yearbooks at the different schools. I mean, there was a lot of color that I was able to get in there. But it was a lot of work.
Did you use an editor before coming to Kohler Books? This is a question from Lizzie Wright, another one of our authors.
I did. I used well, it wasn't a deep edit. It was more of a I would say it was a light-handed edit. And then we went from there.
Gotcha. All right. Oh, now I do want to dive into marketing. So the first thing I want to talk about is how you find your audiences. So, obviously the first thing you guys are going to do is start local. So, I do want to talk about what you did there, how you found people there to connect with, and then, how did you expand? How did you go outside of that to people who had maybe never heard these names before?
Mm-hmm.
Who do we want to throw the ball to first?
All right, I'll jump in on that one. So, my dad had always dreamed of having this book done. So we started very, very early with marketing. Actually, we did things that people say you're not supposed to do. So we started very basically with a Facebook fans page that focused on memorabilia of the restaurant. So I called it Fans of the Prima Donna Restaurant. And I think I used my dad as that it's at Joe Costanzo Prima Donna, which is still our handle. And we would post things like pictures of the restaurant during the 80s, 90s, famous people that came in. My dad had a big wall of fame with all kinds of plaques in both the entranceway and in the bar. I would post stories if it was somebody's birthday that worked there. It started to get a lot of traction locally because we were in business from 1986 into the early 2000s. And we've estimated that in that time, we had about 1 million people walk through our doors as customers. And they weren't just 1 million local people. Our restaurant kind of became a destination for people who were traveling on business or on pleasure to Pittsburgh. So that's how I started to pick up some steam and momentum. And we were one of the only books, our former agent, Letitia Gomez, told us, and she covers a lot of really large names now. She's into acquisition and editing, so she no longer is an agent, but she sat me down whenever I first met her over Zoom, and she said, how are you getting news coverage? Your book is not even finished, and it was not finished. We didn't even finish it until the summer of 2021-ish. And I was started to get news coverage on this in 2020, mostly local, mostly Pittsburgh, but then it stemmed out because then I started doing recipes and memes. And then I started to get coverage, through Syracuse University, which is my alma mater. And it just branched out from there. So I always think it's better to start local, to start with who and what you know, and then to branch out. But it's also very important in marketing, and not just marketing a book, but if you are in sales and marketing really in any field, it's very important to not only know your audience, but to speak to them personally. So I always have an archetype of what, my two main audiences look like, both a female and a male. And before I post something on social media, before I put out a newsletter, before I design an event, because we do a lot of events, that's sort of our thing. I always think about what would this person think about it, and what would this person think about it, and how would they consume this event or this particular reading. And that's how I set things up, because if you go out for yourself, people know it and they're not going to connect to you. But as soon as you think about what does my audience want, what would be useful for them, what information can I give them that they're just not going to throw into their trash or to their spam? What's going to make them keep on reading my emails? And it's different for us than it probably would be for Carey, than it would be for anybody else on the call, maybe Lizzie included. Hi, Lizzie. Lizzie and I have spoken at length too. So, you have to think about what that looks like, and then you just leverage from there. And small wins become larger wins, and interest begets other interest. And that's what I'll say about that.
Carey, we're gonna get to you, but I always like to jump in because I used to dedicate myself to building websites and a lot of author websites and content like that, like restaurants or sorry, recipes, little anything you can give away for free. I always say go for it to get them to sign up to your newsletter, which is what you're talking about, because that list, your newsletter, is going to be so much more valuable than any kind of social media followers where the algorithm may or may not be pushing your content out. So if you have anything that you can give away for free, somebody comes to your website and you say, get this, whatever it is, give it away, and hopefully you'll get that email list going. All right, Carey, how did you look for your audience and what was your strategy with that?
Well, my audience was pretty defined, and I felt like that was kind of an advantage dealing with a well-known personality that people knew, and they were always interested. I mean, the fact that it was an unknown part of what had been written, nobody really thought there was anything else to tell. So it was a whole new angle for which to see this coach. But beyond that, it was a really cool human interest story. But I had that fan base already built in. So like Facebook groups, there's, a million. I mean, Alabama has probably one of the most loyal fan groups there are. And because there were also about 4 other universities that were also connected, West Point and Kentucky, and all of those were natural ways to spread the story. And people, particularly sports, people interested in sports, seemed to be of interest. So also sports reporters were interested in learning more about it. And so I would say exactly what Maria said. It's finding those, it just sort of one thing leads to another, and to just keep, for me, it's been a slow, just trickling, just keep going. The other thing that I identified 2 audiences. So one was the Alabama football fan. The other was the World War II history buff, because there's an untold World War II story about how football was used to help win World War II. And that is a really unknown story. So I capitalize on that, and I speak to different groups all over about that. And that's just an exponential, I'm just trying to get exposure to the title, because I think that word of mouth it's hard to measure really what is driving or not driving sales. If that's, if you want to get your story out there, and mine was, I was passionate about just getting this story out there, just get it out there, which of course translates into sales. But
how did you groups to speak at?
Well, if you think about it, that generation who had really a lot of interest is our older generation. So between 60 and 80 is my sweet spot. And a lot of those people are in assisted living retirement communities. So I first started, I go around the state and speak at different retirement communities, and they love it. And I love to get it out there. So, and then that's also building a platform for me in terms of that subject. I'm not a historian, and I say I'm not a historian, but I am like an investigative journalist. So that has proven to be really a really good way to spread the word. I don't want to jump ahead though.
Go for
Uh,
it.
yeah. So the other thing I do is I have bookmarks, and if ever I see any one of the universities, especially the University of Alabama, where people will put stuff on their cars or whatever, I put them under the windshield wiper.
There you go. I haven't heard
So
that one before.
I know I thought I'm going to share that with the Kohler webinar because I don't know if that's, people may just throw them in the trash. I don't know, but that fan, I remember I even if ever I see anybody wearing a University of Alabama hat or a VMI or any of those colleges, I'm just always selling books. I always give them a bookmark. Say, if you have any, if you'd like to read a really good book about some of these guys, if you're interested in history. So anyway, I just throw that out there. It's just little things that have come to mind. And I love that idea about, building your newsletter and giving away something free.
And if
That's
you
great.
don't have, if you're not, lucky enough to have recipes, which everybody is like a universal, everybody likes, I tell people that you can even give away the first 2 to 3 chapters of your book for free. Just take the ARC PDF that's got for the cover and the whole beginning, and you can open it in an Acrobat and delete all the rest of the pages and just throw that up there and email it to them if they sign up, and give them a taste, and hopefully they'll buy the rest. And yeah, your newsletter is a good way to send out your events and future books if you're going to write one. But Ruthie and Maria, did you all have paraphernalia that you handed out? Anything like that?
We have
Yeah.
bookmarks.
Ah,
I do have bookmarks too. I think I have one right
I
here.
think a bookmark is
Um,
an author's business
Yeah.
card.
Yes.
and I think,
I just
oh yeah, go ahead, Ruthie. I'll
I
show.
was just going to say there's so many avenues, and we've split it up, and Maria's done more than I have because of my schedule. But for example, the Carnegie Library system is enormous in Pittsburgh. I didn't know you had to go to every library. They don't have one ordering system. Every library orders its own books. So it's a combination of visiting the libraries and sending letters so that they would stock the book. Um, we weren't getting a lot of PR in Pittsburgh, though. We've done radio and television and podcasts. So that helped with the libraries. We got the word out. We went through alumni associations. We just brainstormed what we could think of, and I'll try this and I'll try that. Maria has submitted the book to several contests, and we've won some awards. So every little thing, that's a new website. The book's featured. You get some more readers. Our challenge right now is to build it outside of the Pittsburgh area.
Mhm.
And I admit I was reluctant when we launched in Pittsburgh because I teach middle school in Buffalo, and parents are very protective and conservative these days. And I thought, oh, it's an adult book, and at times it's rough. It's corrupt town, and you run a bar, and you have to be authentic. So that authenticity might look shocking to a 6th grader. Oh, my little teacher wrote this, but it was nonfiction. So you've got to be authentic. So I was hesitant to really push in the area where I teach because I know how protective parents are. Parents are fearful today of what's out there. So we can do better here, because I am known, but I didn't want to be known for that because my audience here is younger people. although we are we are going to have to do this in Buffalo.
I do think
But
schools and universities is a good avenue for biographies, especially when they have that historical element. And like you said, you have to know your audience. If it has something that's darker, maybe don't go too young.
right,
Uh,
right.
mhm.
Um, oh, that just brought a thought that I lost. That's
Oh, I'm
important.
sorry, I jumped in there.
No, that's okay. That's fine. Oh, so as far as it being a local book, though, we have plenty of celebrities that are known nationally or even internationally in some cases. So that's an advantage in this book. But really, whatever your book, every book has a setting. So if it's a local setting, so what? You know, it's still a setting.
Mhm.
And so that's the approach we take.
Mhm. Did anybody use a PR firm, a publicity expert, anything, outside help?
I will go ahead. Did you
Oh,
all?
yeah. I actually interviewed a ton of publicists. I ended up not going with a publicist because the amount of money that you put out will probably never return. But my agent gave us a little secret, and a lot of publicists use these source houses that have databases of hundreds and thousands of news people. I call it the QVC of marketing. I used Ascot Media. It's a lot of bang for a very little buck. So they basically help you to craft a press release. It was under $1,000 for 3 months. They send that press release to everybody. Now they're not doing a personalized touch. They're sending it to everybody. So I have lots and lots of friends in the media. I went to Syracuse. I went to the Newhouse School. That is like one of the premier media schools in the country. So I have friends that work for CNBC, CNN, MSNBC, a lot of places that would not be a great fit for our book, but they still got our press release. But what it did allow us to do is we got reviews in every major paper in Pittsburgh, including the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, which is the largest newspaper in Pittsburgh. And I can say, hands down, if there's one thing that drove sales for us to this day, it's that article. A guy actually came out of retirement to write it because he had been to my dad's restaurant. The article doesn't speak, as my dad says, completely favorably of him, but it tells the entire story and it's juicy and it makes you want to pick up a copy of the book. But they were a helpful engine to get us in front of people. What they don't do is they will send you an email and say, okay, XYZ person is interested in you, and then you need to follow up. But I have lots and lots of media training, and that was something that was very easy for me. I would 100% use them again on future projects for sure. They were very worthwhile. Uh, Not so much for the podcast. If you're talking about podcasts, there are a million Facebook groups that are always looking for podcast guests. Join them and chime in. It's pretty easy to get onto most podcasts, but for television, newspaper, magazine, really that was the way to go, I thought.
Mhm. That's a really great tip. Carey, what were you gonna say?
I probably the biggest jump in sales came after a reporter in the market, an Alabama sports writer, published an article. So I think that, and after a radio appearance.
How did you
So,
get in touch with them? Was that just you or a publicist?
no, so I didn't use a publicist either. I've spoken to a lot of different people, some who have used them, and even they were like, they just like what you were saying, Maria, you never going to get your investment back. It's very hard to quantify the results. I used I found a marketing guy called Rob Eager, and he does a weekly marketing email. He has all kinds of free resources, very reasonable courses in how to do Amazon ads or Facebook ads, which, I did some of those. And but I would take the course and do them myself. So it was, I didn't have to spend tens of thousands of dollars. Plus if you wanted to have personal consulting, they were I don't get any kickback from him, by the way, but I've been utilizing his services for probably 10 years. And of all the different, he would give sample email templates, ways to contact and prepare for podcasts and, anything. And a lot of them were free. So I highly recommend that, just to give you the confidence if you don't have a lot of background like Maria does. You can read a lot, and there are resources like that. He's not the only one that does that, but he's a very reputable person and has been in business for a very long time. So, yeah, I would agree. You kind of even the way I was able to get on the radio was through networking. So it's all about networking. I just feel like anytime someone would say, call this person, or I think just do it. I mean, even if you've never, it's very nerve-wracking to reach out there and talk to somebody that you never have, to feel like you're, trying to connect. But just like Maria said, they're always looking for content. And so not to be shy about that. And eventually, sometimes it doesn't pan out, but a lot of times it does. And especially if you're passionate about your story and bring that to the table, that's half the battle. That's what people want to hear.
Anyone use LinkedIn for networking for the book? Yeah. You had any success with getting on podcasts or any media hits from that? You just
I
use
think
it like a
so.
regular social media.
Yeah, I think so. Honestly, we've been covered a lot in very like gazillion different avenues. So I don't remember where everything has come
Yeah.
from, but I definitely have leveraged LinkedIn, and I've seen a shift in LinkedIn in the last year, personally and professionally. Um, yeah, I think it's a really great resource, and I utilize it for sure. I did do a live stream through StreamYard. Some of our larger events, we had a really large launch party at the Heinz History Center 2 days before our book came out. And I live streamed that through Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn through StreamYard. I also just did a keynote speech at the Key for Women conference through KeyBank. I also live streamed that on LinkedIn. So yeah, it's a great way to get the word out. The nice thing with LinkedIn is that people who have your same interest or your same job title, you can't hear me? No?
I can.
Okay, sorry. People who have your same interest or your same job title will be pushed your content, versus with Instagram and also Facebook, the algorithms are a little different. Instagram algorithms now are more about who's sharing your content, not necessarily what your content is. And that's very hard for most people. It's very hard for me. But you just kind of have to know the platforms and what to put out there. But yeah, I think LinkedIn is very helpful.
That's
Has
great.
anybody else done a blog tour, book blog tour? So I just did that, and it was great through a service. It was very reasonable, and it gets you out there on Instagram and sharing posts and basically they, the service that I use set up about 16 book bloggers, and then they review it and they'll post their review on, on Amazon or Goodreads or wherever you want. And then they also put a really nice graphic and link to their, also to their book review thing. It's been great. I mean, I don't know how much really it did, other than just getting it out there to a group that I would never have reached before. So
Is it a specific place that you went through, or?
so it's a service. Well, they have lots of them, but I would highly recommend the one that I used, which was Susie's Book Tours, and you can find her online.
Not an S or a Z?
Z,
Susie.
Susie's Book Tours. And as it turns out, the small world like McKee's Rocks. I mean, that was crazy. So Susie's Book Tours, I connected with her. We set everything up. And then I came to find out that she lives about 30 minutes from my son in Connecticut. So I was able to meet her. So I've had a in-person, I like to meet people that I work with, and I would highly recommend her. She's very knowledgeable, and she knows the book reviewers that she works with. And you have to be, you just there. Like I said, there are more. They're getting more and more popular. If you go on Instagram, like Book Talk, and
Yeah.
that's on TikTok, right?
Yeah, I think it's maybe Bookstagram on Instagram, right?
Yeah, you're right. Bookstagram. Yeah. But they have a lot of
Oh, yeah.
followers and readers, and it's a good way to share. Although, like Maria said, that's hard to share and repost on Instagram. I think it's hard anyway, but
Yeah.
Um,
Can I
believe women.
piggyback off of
Yeah, go for it.
something that Carey just said a couple of questions ago that I think is very important? And in our opinion, we very much underrated it whenever we were working on our book proposal. So I always tell people, when you work on your book proposal, especially your marketing and your promotion, that should be the section that you put a lot of weight in. And it's not a section that ever becomes final, right? It's always a completely working document that has ebbs and flows. And one of the things that Carey was talking about earlier that I think is very important, especially in the nonfiction world, is this whole idea of nostalgic experiences. And she brought up the fact that there are lots of World War II historians and people that are really into college football history from the beginning of time, especially, some of those larger, I don't know if Alabama's still in the Big Ten conference, or, whatever it is in, but like that really creates an incredibly interested audience that will do just about anything to seek out more information on that topic. And for us, one of the things that we grossly underestimated, and it seems silly and stupid, and I should have thought about it, was the food nostalgia piece. People not only missed my dad as the restaurateur, but they missed coming down every week and eating chicken parmesan. So whenever we started to incorporate more food into our marketing plan, I do immersive cooking and book talks, I call them. I just trademarked it. I call it my cook and book experience. It's an hour and a half of actual hands-on cooking with family and restaurant inspired meals, and then an hour and a half of a book discussion. We recreate the prima donna. A high-end kitchen countertop company approached me last February and said, "What about recreating the restaurant?" And I said, "You're crazy." And they said, "We'll give you the space. We'll take care of all the payments. You set the menu. We'll provide you with a head chef. You guys just come and talk and provide all the hospitality." And I said, "How can I say no to this?" And that's become a thing. So really, always, if you think you might be able to do it, just say yes. because you're probably just as qualified as the other people that they're considering, but we're our biggest doubters and our biggest naysayers. So I don't know if you can find a way, especially historical fiction people, nonfiction, biography, memoir, narrative nonfiction, if you can find a way to pull nostalgia into your marketing plan, in my opinion, it's slam dunk.
Mm,
Mhm.
that's great advice. Okay, I do want to end on like what your best advice is and then what you wouldn't do again. But before we do that, Lizzie again has another question. Were there any ways that you could track return on investment for podcasts? Because can you track sales right after them? We use Author Nexus if people know, but ebook sales take up to a month to appear, so you can't necessarily track that. Did you give out discount codes, anything on your website, anything where you could track social media sales, anything like that? I think online sales are hard unless you're using
Yeah.
Amazon ads and it tells you, boom, you got a sale.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's very hard. I know that you can do something with affinity codes. I've never tried it, but I know that is, something that you can do. You could type in a code if you've heard something, and then that does track it. The conglomeration, I was telling Ruthie, we almost, we had to remind ourselves about today because we just have so many things that we just constantly do. It used to be a really big deal when we got on a podcast. We're on podcast all week, every week. So for us, it's very hard at this point to track one particular thing. I only know the Post Gazette because I saw such a large jump in our Amazon rankings right after that came up. We went
That's
from,
one way to track it. You can track the Amazon rankings. Yep.
yeah, we're always normally hover, around within the first year we were always under 100. And
Mhm.
now we're between 100 and 500 depending. And after the Post Gazette, we were like in the top 10. So
Nice.
I knew it had a big impact.
I do know that I tried this with Amazon. You can, there's a little, what do they call it? I don't know what they call it, a little divot or little placement thing that you can put on wherever you're advertising. Like if you put it on your website and someone clicks
Oh,
onto
widget?
Amazon, a
Yeah,
widget, thank you.
widget.
Um, I did that for different things. So you can put it on a Facebook ad or your website and it'll track, how many
Oh, there you go.
people going from your website to over there. But it's a little bit tricky. You have to take that Amazon course, or you can go to
Right.
a tutorial on Amazon. They have those, but it takes a little bit of, the learning curve is, I think, steeper for some than others.
Mhm.
Um, but no, to Lizzie's question, I don't know that you really can.
Right, because clicks don't always equal sales either. So you can.
No, no,
Mhm.
it's totally true.
Mhm.
So it's like what Maria said, you just keep plugging away and you kind of can watch when you have a jump. Like I look at the jump on the Amazon graph when I see that a blip and I'm like, so what happened
Mhm.
on those 2 weeks that caused that blip? And I know for sure, it was, a well-respected sports writer, put that, interview or on the Paul Feinbaum SEC radio show or something like that. That's about the only way I'm like, aha, or if I've given a talk on a particular date
Mhm.
and, I'll see the sales move a little bit, but
Yeah. And I mean, the only other thing is live events. Live events, you can walk away and beyond the shadow of a doubt if you've done
So X
a
amount of
good
money.
job or not.
Right.
mm-hmm,
Mhm.
mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. What is one thing that you did that you would not do again, you would not recommend to our authors?
I would not recommend in-store book events,
Hmm.
book bookstore events.
Why is that?
Um, I don't think people really attend those anymore. Or maybe it was just the time, because it was right after, I guess my book came out in 22. I don't know. I never had, and I've thought we scheduled them around the holidays, and um just a couple. But then on the cover of the Wall Street Journal was a whole article that sort of was mirroring my experience, which was nobody was coming out for, you know, book signing events at stores. And
Mm.
this was celebrities in New York. I mean, was who was writing it. And maybe it's just a matter of luck of the draw, or,
You can
just
always do
time.
it at a different venue.
Right. So I don't think I would do an in-person travel to an in-person
Yeah.
book event unless it was tagged along with other things.
Ruthie, what about you?
Same thing. The live events, I don't know, they sort of become saturated, and that takes time, and you're lugging the books themselves and that kind of thing. We went to something in Pittsburgh, sounded like it was going to be fantastic. And it turns out it was pouring rain, and we were on a lawn,
Oh,
so
yeah.
that lasted about an hour and a half. And she had come from New Jersey, and I came from Buffalo, and we got drenched, and we had to pack up. So
Oh,
it's hard. Now, since that day, we're a little more selective about what might happen. How cold might it be? Is this indoor or out? Where's our placement in the traffic? You ask some of those questions to try to leverage whether or not that's going to be worth your time.
mhm.
Mm.
Maria?
I think, I love Carey's suggestion of the Rob Eager and looking at some of those tutorials on Amazon ads. I paid somebody last year to do some Amazon ads for me. It may have just been coincidental, but it was one of our lowest months of sales.
Mm.
So I don't think I would do that again.
I think it's really hit or miss. We have one author who's doing very, very well, Bill Kennedy. But we've got some others that have dabbled, and we've dabbled, and what you invest is not you get sales, but you might not get money in your pocket. So,
Mm.
everybody's gotta try it if they want, and you gotta educate yourself. Like Carrie said, there's a learning curve, but yeah.
Yeah. And I also did a Goodreads giveaway that I don't recommend either.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I wouldn't either. I did although I haven't been a fan of bulk giveaways, but I will say if you can find an event that, for instance, well, this is football season, so uh, the Bryant Museum in Tuscaloosa was honoring the 1964 championship team, Alabama, and a lot of those players, so they're, senior citizens, very, very, very elderly senior citizens, and they were going to make a trip to the museum. And so I called the museum, and they had books there in their bookstore, and I said, I will replenish your supply. I would like to have each team member get a copy from me
Hmm.
as a gift. And, a lot of other people were going to be coming. So that book then was out in front on a table for, to give to the 12 players that were there. But at the same time, it was getting, some
Mm,
visibility. So I think you have to be careful about what type of giveaways you
mm.
do. And I haven't been a fan of Goodreads, or is the other one Book Blurb or
Um,
BookBub?
but that's it, BookBub.
Yeah.
It's really hard to
Yeah, we
even.
did do
Mm,
Yeah, we did a book bub way in the beginning, and it did yield to a lot of downloads. But again, it's your 99 cents,
right. It might get you some reviews, yeah.
Yeah.
Or boost your sales, but not again, 99 cents, yeah.
Mhm.
All right. Well, our time is up. I thank you guys so much for this. I think it's been a very, really productive conversation. And like I said, this is our first one that's on this type of topics. So I'm going to be pointing people in the future here. And I really liked our discussion about writing biographies and what went behind that to, make it entertaining and all of that. So hopefully, like I said, that wasn't about marketing, but hopefully our authors got something out of that as well. And again, like I said, thank you for your time. And we
Great.
don't have another webinar scheduled right now, but everybody who signed up for our email list, you'll get that as soon as we have the next one. So
It was very fun. It was nice to meet you all
Well,
too.
nice to meet you too, Carey.
Yeah, yeah.
Connect.
We'll have to connect on that McKee's Rocks thing. I think
Yes.
Definitely.
crazy.
all right. Thank
All
you.
right.
Okay.
Thank you
Bye.
Bye.
again.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.